So we're just looking at HTML and CSS and some of the wonderful things that we can do with it. Now, in today's class, I'm going to be taking this a step further, and we'll be looking at containers. Yes, we'll be looking at what I call containers. I don't know what other people might want to call them, but I tend to call them containers because we want to put elements and other elements right inside of them. To begin with, I will want to have a copy of the lesson 3 HTML markups. I would like to have a copy of the lesson 3 HTML markup, which is this one that we created. I want to have a copy of it in another file, right? But we will be using the same CSS style that we had before. So to get this going, I create a new folder called lesson 4. This lesson 4 will become the new site that we're going to open. I'm going to copy the lesson 3 article, the content of the lesson 3 article, along with the CSS into this folder. Take this one and this one, copy both files and paste them. File, open folder, browse to the lesson 4 folder and open that. Let's just rename this file and call it lesson 4 so that you know that this is a lesson 4 HTML file. So let's open that. The reason we're doing that is because we want to maintain all of the markups that we had used in the previous class. So let's right click and open this with live server, or you can also right click right here and open with live server. You see open with live server right there, right click, open with live server, or right click the body and open with live server. So for now, we're going to right click here and choose open with live server. Live server is open and we are now going to start working. So this is where we stopped. We want to introduce 2 different tags or 2 different elements right now. And those elements, let me create a new HTML file here called start.html. And in it, I'm going to do the elements. H2, H3, H4 elements are block elements, meaning that they take the whole width. They take the whole width of their parent element. Other elements like the one we looked at the strong. The strongs and the M, for example, are inline elements in that they stay inline with the element beside them. So you have the block elements that take the whole width of their parent element. If the block element is put directly in the body tag and the body tag is 100% the width of the screen, the block element will take 100% of that width. That's the default nature. You can alter that by use of CSS, but in the default setting or the way it is naturally is that the block elements will take the full width of its parent container and the inline element will just sit next to the other within the same line, until maybe they reach the end of the page or the end of the line and then they wrap into the next line. So it's just the same as saying you're just typing like a next word or a next text in a paragraph. They just sit within the same line. The divs are also like block elements. They're very much the same like the H1 here because they take the entire width of the parent container, and you can place components and objects or tags or multiple elements inside the div. So the div is going to be very vital here because it will hold the structure of our site. Everything we want to put in this website, we'll be stuffing them into these div tags. But we also do have the inline version of it, which is the span. A span element sits inline. Now you might want to use this if you don't want any default styles on your text or on the object. Mostly you're going to use the span for text. And if you wanted it to be bold, of course, you will stick with the strong. If you wanted it to have emphasis, you stick with that. But if you just want it to be an old plain text with nothing, no styling at all to it, where you're going to have to use a class and then assign your own style to it, that's what you go for. You go for this. Now, the next thing that I want to introduce is the issue of classes. We can't just target the span or the divs because that will mean that we are actually affecting all the divs on our page. That's not going to work out very well for us. So for that, we give what we call a unique class name to the element. So it can help us target those, we can effectively target those class names with the CSS. This is what I mean. We enter in an attribute, and how you create an attribute is that you give it an attribute name. And in this case, the attribute name will always be called class. An equals to sign, and then a quotation mark. Now, between these quotation marks, these double quotes, we're going to enter whatever name without spaces. You avoid special characters except maybe the hyphen. We're going to give a name to the class. Maybe we can just call this name, this is the name of container. When we call it something like container, we can then go to the CSS, which will be our CSS file here, and then target that container by typing, starting with a dot to mean that we're targeting a class, and then we can say container, then the curly braces. And any style we place inside this container will be applied to this element right here. So for now, let us do something and open this page also, the start.html on live server. And let's create a link to bring in the style, a link tag to bring in the style.html file, which is this one. Let's link it up here. So we say link because we're trying to link that, and we want to link with a href, and we say the file name is style.css, and what we are actually doing, this document is a style sheet, right? So we close that up. Now when we save, the style sheet is applied now to the document. We say header 1, we save it, we see header 1. Remember that in our previous lesson we had styled header 1 with these styles. So it's easy for us to see header 1, but this time around we want to add a little bit of shading so you could see how header 1 cuts through the entire width of its parent, or fills the entire width of its parent object. Let's just add a background, the background color here of red. Now remember that we had placed margins along the sides of this. Let's go over and take the margins out at this point in time. Let's delete the margins there and save. You can see that these block elements take the entire width of its parent container, the full width of the parent container. Okay, let's look at the strong here and type the word bold. But let's target the strong element, and then we now say that the background color should be blue, and save that. You see the difference. See, this is an inline element, and you could immediately see at this point that the H1 takes the full width of its parent, while the strong tag is sitting in line. Okay, let's go over here now and enter the word italics, and you can see that these two tags are inline tags. See them sitting next to themselves like that. If we come over here now and also target the EM tag, and we say the background color should be green, and always remember to end your CSS line with a semicolon. That's like saying full stop. You need to end a line, a semicolon. You have to end your CSS line, each of those sections, with a semicolon. So that's what we have. We have this. You see? So if we get back to our CSS, we said this one is a container. So let's just type container and see what it behaves like. And in this case, we're going to delete these ones because they are similar to what we have above. We're going to say this is a span, and let's duplicate this. Let's duplicate this and say this one is span 1 and this one is span 2. So you could see we have container, we have span 1, we have span 2. Now let's get back to our CSS again. We're working with just this part. Let's say that we're targeting a div here. Let's give the div a background color of, say, yellow. Did you notice? You notice immediately that the div here behaves as a block element. Just as we have our H1 element, it fills the entire width of its parent container. Well, what about the span? We go span, and let's say background color of which color? Pink. And there you go. The two spans sit in line just like that. But these ones have predefined styles on them. And for our span, there are no predefined styles, meaning that we can then create a class name and target them. For example, this div here, we had given it a class name of container. And for that, we said you will create something like this. Let's bring it over here and paste here. We now say, we can say we want to change the background color of that to a brown. So you could see now that we changed the background color, and because we are placing the style inside this class, it's going to go into our HTML and look for an element that has a class with the name container. If we also come to this span here, for example, and container, watch what happens when we save that. You see, that becomes also, takes the style that we created. That makes it very flexible for us to create one style and reuse them in multiple elements as much as we can.